So there is some graphic photos in my presentation, so just please take note of it. So yeah, then I will continue then. So let's go back on some fingerprint history, going back to the Stone Ages like the previous presenter mentioned. Where did fingerprints start? So just want to clear this one here quickly. Okay, so it started way back in the 1800s when fingerprints was used to seal documents and letters, send it through post. And then Johannes in Vigilia in December 1823, he then discovered 9 different ridge patterns on fingerprints. Sir William James in 1858, he started his first official use of fingerprints in Bengal in India. And then St. Francis Galton published a book on fingerprints in 1892. Yeah, and so we can carry on. In May 81, he read the article of experiments conducted by Galton. He worked out a fingerprint system, and his system was implemented in La Paya Police Department. So this is where the fingerprints actually came to the police forces as can be used as evidence in court. Sir Henry Edward, in 1891, he was appointed as the Inspector General of Police, also in Bengal, India. So let's carry on quickly. Where fingerprint started in South Africa. Colonel James Clark, he was born in England and moved to South Africa in 1893 and was appointed in charge of the Criminal Investigation Department in Pietermaritzburg in Natal, now known as KwaZulu-Natal. And then provincial fingerprint officers in 1900, Colonel Clark and Sir Henry and Sergeant Pasman studied the science of fingerprints in South Africa. So that's when the South African Police Criminal Record Center was opened. And they only had a few fingerprint officers all over South Africa. Now, South Africa is quite a big country, and they only had, 5 or 6 fingerprint officers. During 1927, they only had 8 fingerprint officers: Durban, East London, Port Elizabeth, Grahamstown, Bloemfontein, Joburg, Cape Town, and then Pietermaritzburg. So in South Africa, on the 16th of February 1905, the first fingerprint case was taken to court and was successful. 6th of September 1935, the first palm print case was taken to court and was successful. And then the 22nd of October 1968, the first footprint case was taken to court and was successful. So when does a human fingerprint develop? It starts right in the womb, between 12 and 16 weeks after fetal development, and fully develop at birth. And your fingerprint and footprint and even palm prints don't change until decomposition sets in after death. I can just correct that. So I can still get fingerprints of decomposed bodies. So is that statement true? We don't know. So I'm just going to use some basic fingerprint patterns. I'm not going to go into all 9 that was in the history of fingerprints. So for today's lecture, I'm just going to go through arches, loops, and whorls. All the patterns has a definition. It throw from one side to the other side without making an independent recurve and stuff like that. The loop is at least one finger ridge make an independent backward turn, and then the loop, this pattern is at least one of the ridges until one circuit is complete. So as you can see on that small photos. And then there's some fingerprint patterns: a plain arch, the dented arch, ulnar loop, radial loop, plain whorl, central pocket loop, double loop whorl, and then the accidental whorl. Then ridge features in your fingerprint. There's a couple of ridge features that we use for identification purposes. And I think this is all over the world. Like island lakes, bifurcation, trifurcations, overlaps, short ridges, beginning or ending, crossovers, and then spurs. As the patterns, so the ridge features also have definitions so that we can distinguish in which one is which that we use for identification when we go to court. I'm not going to go through this one at a time. So if you have any questions, we can come back later to this. I actually want to come to what I'm presenting on today. So where does identification of a deceased or a body or decomposed body, where does it start? It actually starts right in the beginning when we attend to crime scenes, when we discover the body in the state it is, where it's found, if it's a shallow grave, it's a burn or a shooting case. So on scenes like this, oh yeah, then just please guys, don't let some of these photos discourage you to come visit South Africa. So tongue in the cheek. On crime scenes like this, our investigation starts early to see who the person is. So we will use the secondary identifiers. I will go in a little bit further down the presentation to secondary identifiers and also then primary identifiers. So this is three of our newest forensic pathology services buildings in the Western Cape. We have Tygerberg Mortuary that is in Cape Town Metro, as well as then the OFPI. That is one of the first in Africa with all the technology that's put into that building. So we are quite fond of this building. And then the one in the bottom right is the newest building that we built and completed in Knysna in the Western Cape. Very proud, brand new buildings to help solve crimes and give loved ones a closure in these difficult times. So, identification of deceased. So we use first the primary identifiers, fingerprints, DNA, or dental records. I don't know across the world how accurate dental records is, but here in South Africa, I don't think I'm not going to call name numbers or figures, but dental records, oh, it's a tough call. Yeah, it's like fingerprints and DNA, definitely primary identifiers. Then we go, if we have crime scenes or to also identify deceased, we go to secondary identifiers while we wait for the results of your primary. So that's your tattoos, your scarring, your personal items, clothing. And then even if you have had operations, sometimes there's a serial number that can link you back to a specific hospital and then also your file. So that's what we call our secondary identifiers. So yeah, so we can do facial reconstruction, and anthropology, antemortem, postmortem, and then my sole, I must say, one of my jobs in forensic pathology as a fingerprint expert. I must just mention that in forensic pathology, we are not linked to the South African Police Service. We are working for the Department of Health in South Africa, in the Western Cape, South Africa. And we are only 3 fingerprint experts in the Western Cape working with fingerprints of unknown deceased persons in our facilities. So yeah, I'm mostly focused on fingerprints, do it on a daily to weekly basis. I can give you some figures that in the Cape Metro, we have 2 big facilities, that 2 nice buildings that you see. They do plus minus 9,000 unnatural deaths a year. And then off that, there is some, let's say a couple of hundred, maybe to 1,000 unknowns that will be linked with fingerprints or then DNA. So fingerprinting a deceased, there's some techniques that I'm using and developed through the years to successfully get fingerprints of deceased, to positively identify them and then obviously hand them over to the loved ones so that they can get closure and bury the loved ones. So I use the ink method, powder and tape, injecting the fingers with a fluid or a tissue builder. And then if we go to the decomposed bodies, it's degloving. So then I'll do the fingerprints on the epidermal skin, the subepidermal and the dermal prints. And also do microphotography and then the removal of the fingers or the finger pads. We'll get into that down the presentation later. So when I start doing the fingerprints at a facility, there's something that we have to do before we can get the fingerprints clean, the fingers cleaned and washed. So release the rigor mortis. Then we just use a nice sponge with some pine gel to create some foam with like a hot water, a nail brush, and then a dry towel. Some of our mortuary facilities, maybe across the world, use a sheet that they cover the body with. Not a great um, tool to dry hands because they don't, the towel absorb more water. And then I used ethanol and that to clean more, to take the water away. Possibilities, the hands loosened for the fingerprints, so it's more flexible. Fingerprints is crisp and clear. The removal of artifacts like sand or dust or blood is clean, so I can take a nice clean fingerprint and then scan it with the AFIS system so that we can get the identification. So if you get a body's hand like this, usually the fingerprints won't work. What comes out nice and clean so that we can get identification. So I'm just going to explain quickly the process to clean the hands and then we'll move on. So on this hand, specifically this hands, there's a lot of sand and debris on it. So obviously if you use the ink method, that is with a ink roller, the picture will follow now, then the dust or the sand or the grass or whatever is on the diseases and the blood will stick to the ink roller and then you will not get a nice fingerprint. So release the rigor mortis. You have your bucket with soap water, hot soap water. You give the hand a gentle wash and a scrub, and then you dry it with a towel. Hands is nice and clean so that you can get a nice clear fingerprint for scanning on AFIS. So when do I use the ink method? I usually use it on fresh bodies. Let's call it fresh bodies, where the skin is still soft, like our fingers. If you touch your hands, the fingers are still soft. So we use the ink roller or the spoon to put in your fingerprint strip. I'll show you a photo now. And then obviously the technique, there must be correct pressure. Otherwise, the fingerprint will be distorted. Too much ink or too little ink will have then a little bit of a disadvantage. So on this photo, you'll see on the top, you'll get the fingerprint strip that is marked with the right hand, the thumb, index finger, middle finger, ring finger, little finger. The ink roller that we used, if we use the ink method, and then the spoon where you'll see there's some small hooks on it. You just slide in the fingerprint strip and you roll your fingers with some ink, not too much to get an ink blob on the fingerprint strip, and then you get your nice clear fingerprints. So in South Africa, we only need 7 points on a fingerprint to be identified and then take to court for identification purposes. So that is the condition. After the hands was washed, we got this nice clear fingerprints and it was scanned into AFIS and this one was handed over to his loved ones. So another case study I did with the ink method is this lady was unfortunately in a train accident. She tried to cross the railway and the train hit her and yeah, so that was the end result. So important is that the family can't visually identify her. So obviously then they must go to the scientific. That's also the way fingerprints and DNA comes in. But after a struggle, not going to lie to you, we got the hand, clean the hand, wash it nicely, and use the ink method. We got 5 complete fingers, could have scanned it into AFIS. Scientific method was used, and she was handed over to the family for a funeral. Excuse me. Powder and tape. This is used when it's more difficult fingerprint to do. It's maybe dry, it's wrinkled, it's pruned. Pruned is like if you sit too long in the bathtub, like the ladies like to maybe have a glass of wine in the bath and your fingers all wrinkle up like the old ladies' fingers, then you will use the fingerprint powder and tape. Then we'll use black fingerprint powder, a brush, a fingerprint brush, normally an animal hairbrush, fingerprint tape, and then fingerprint strips. Good alternative for ink. Sometimes I use powder and tape for the fresh bodies. It gives you just a very nicer, clear print. The other thing is we just make a note if you use powder and tape and you lift the fingerprint image from the finger, it's then a negative. Um, Seeing that you lift the tape, the powder of the fingerprint and you stick the tape onto the fingerprint strip, and then it will be a negative image. So at APHIS, you must just make sure you make a nice footnote so that the APHIS expert just flip the print back to a positive before scanning it in. Otherwise, your left hand look like your right hand and your right hand look like your left hand. But normally we have some clever people doing that. So there's our fingerprint animal hairbrush. We still use the same fingerprint strip. And then obviously then the black fingerprint powder with the tape. So the fingerprint photos you see there in the left, right bottom corner. If you use an ink roller, obviously the ink won't go into the grooves. And with the ink, with the brush and fingerprint powder, it will go set in the grooves, and with the tape, you can just press with your nail or your finger into that grooves, and then you'll get a nice clear fingerprint. So that's just the application on the fingerprints, and then you stick the tape to the finger, you lift it and stick it to your fingerprint strip. So this guy is, yeah, so sometimes you'll get bodies, or like this guy, or let's say a mummified body, a body or decomposed, that you use all different type of fingerprint techniques to get 5 fingers or 10 possible fingerprints. So some bodies will have a variety of techniques so that you can use for different fingers. Each finger can have a different technique for printing. I just mentioned that. Need only one print to identify it, preferably the left or the right thumb. In South Africa, we also tend to go and use the left or right index finger these days. The criminals just got a little bit more clever. But you never know the quality of the prints, but you have to compare it to. So that guy gave me at least some nice fingerprint results. It was scanned into APHIS, and yeah, he was handed over to his family after they were looking for him for a couple of months. So injecting the fingerprints, the finger pads, I mentioned it that if you sit in a bath, you get all wrinkled, prune fingers. So then I use the injecting method. Normally in drownings or bodies that was found in rivers or dams or even the ocean. The fingers is soft, but they lost volume. So it's not a degloving, sometimes not. So you can just inject it with a thin needle and some tissue builder and just to blow the finger up like a small balloon, and then use the ink method, or you can use the powder and tape method. Injecting the finger at the first finger base with a tissue builder, then it was just like a small bubble, a balloon, and then you can use then your different techniques to get a fingerprint. So the fingers will look like that if your body was found in water, all wrinkled up. And then that photo in the bottom just shows you where to stick in the needle, and you can see it makes like a small bubble. So it blows up, massage the finger a little bit. But before you do the massaging, just make sure that you take out the needle. Otherwise you get a small prick and you don't want to go on antivirals. So on the left-hand side is the water damaged fingers before it's injected, and also the results on the bottom. And then there's on the right-hand side, you can see the fingers that after injection, and also then the result much clearer than the one on the left. And you will see there's less voids on the right-hand side, and obviously more points for identification purposes. The degloving, normally this comes up to bodies that's in shallow graves or in the sea, or that's lying in the bush for a couple of days in the hot summer time. And then the skin will be like a glove that you can take off. So then you do the fingerprints on the epidermis, on the loose skin, and you can also, if that doesn't work, you can still get fingerprints of the dermis. The method is removing the glove from the hand. So that's actually removing the skin from the hand. Washing and drying it, same method as the ink and tape. So yeah, you're just going to put the skin over your hand while you're wearing a glove. Then you can use the powder and tape method, or you can go back to the ink roller and you will get nice fingerprints if the hand is correctly cleaned and prepped for fingerprinting. So there's some just photos of fingers that was degloved. Um, so the finger pads was cut off on this left-hand side. Then you go to the same story, wash and clean and dry, and then you can use the powder and tape or even the ink method. The one in the bottom right corner is a whole hand, the skin of the hand that was degloved. So very carefully so that you don't lose the fingers sequence. Then just wash it, clean it, and then you can use your different ways of fingerprint techniques to get the fingerprints. So that's the same story. You just wash it, dry it, powder and tape, and then use the ink or the ink powder tape. Get nice fingerprints, scan it into AFIS, and hand it over to the family. So this is totally degloved hands. So there's no more epidermals. Your fingerprints is straight up to the dermal. And then it comes a little bit more tricky because you don't have skin to work with. So that's not actually just like, let's call it flesh you have to work with. But it's all positive. You can get fingerprints of that with the boiling technique or the scorching technique with some ethanol. Then you'll get your fingerprint ridges to let's say wake up again, and then you have a nice result. Epidermal is the outside of your finger, as we can see it now, and the dermal is if your skin is removed. And then, as you can see there, the fingerprint ridges still stay the same, and you can still make identification of this deceased. Microcell. This is one that I'm not fond of. It takes a lot of time, but you can use it on the dermal fingerprint, on the dermal skin part of your fingers. Alternative for fingerprinting, photos. It's usually used in a lab or in a mortuary if you have time, if you don't have 20 bodies lying there waiting for you to do the fingerprints on it. What is this? Microphotography. Yeah. I say microphotography. Sorry, I thought it was microcell. Sorry. So usually use a Nikon camera, macro lens, a camera stand or a tripod, correct measuring unit, and then the settings is your f-stop on 21, your time delay to fine, your photo quality, ISO is low, shutter speed low, and then you get your nice fingerprint. But then again, it's a negative to a positive. So when you do the photos for scanning to AFIS, just make sure that you just make the fingerprint a positive and not scan it in as a negative. That may cause a problem for identification. There it is now. So microcell. Microcell is when fingerprint is dehydrated, yes, you will see I did a, what do you call it? I got some other techniques that I'll go through now because microcell is just a technique that's not very user friendly. It's dirty. It takes a long time. So yeah, but I have to go through that with you guys so that you can at least see that I'm trying. Method is you mix microcell with a hardener, apply to the fingers, wait to set. You can actually do it if you use window putty, or you can play with your kids' clay. It's more or less the same thing. If you press your finger into clay, you'll see there's your fingerprint in the clay, and then yeah, you can just do it and you know the microcell technique. So you get that look like a toothpaste that you have to mix with the hardener and then apply it to the finger on the right hand corner and then wait a couple of minutes for it to set and dry. You then take it off the finger and then you get this the cast of your finger, but in a like a silicone base type of thing. But then your work don't stop there. Because it's like a silicone base, you still have to now pin it down with measuring units and photograph it. And then you can go to powder and tape or then to the ink method. So that's a cast of the finger after you lift it off the deceased fingers. That's just applying some powder to it. And then you get your results, but where you use the ink method or the powder and tape and you get it in 3 to 5 minutes, here you have to wait until 40 minutes for it to set. And then you still have to do a lot of work to get these results. So yeah, so the first photo on left is microcell with microphotography, then powder and tape. And then again, photography and powder and tape, just to show the different contrast of this microsol. The comparison, if it is a skeletonized body, if you don't use the microsol, you can get at the top left. And then if you use only powder and tape, you lose some detail in the fingers. So obviously then your chances to do identification is a little bit less. Powder and tape, same story, but if you use ink, there will be a big void in the middle of the finger and you lose all your data for the identification. And then I decided, no, I'm not going to play with microsol anymore. It's dirty, it's time consuming. And I started to do a rehydration solution. Um, it is time consuming, but at first you can see there on the right hand side, let's go to the left hand side, ethanol and distilled water with ERA, not effective. No ridge lines seen after 48, 24, or 96 hours. So that was a fail. 1% potassium hydrox solution. It was also a fail. 24 hours, 48 hours, and 96 hours with no effect. And obviously, then warm tap water, it will not rehydrate a skeletonized fingerprint. So let's go to sodium carbonate and ethanol. It's a very good soaking solution. And you can just buy it at the shops. Okay, not ethanol, but the rest, soda ash. You use it in pools, you can buy it at supermarkets, and it's cheap. So that's a positive. And when to use it. Skeletonized body fingers incredibly hard and very wrinkly. So not even the powder and tape can work there. And no other method is possibly used to get the fingerprints. So, yes, let's go. 25% ammonium hydroxide solution. Fingerprints, ridge lines successfully restored after 48 hours. Then that hard fingers became as soft as our fingers. At this, if you touch your hands, it just came out like this. So I can use the normal ink roller or powder and tape. Sodium carbonate solution with ethanol and distilled water. It was the same result. After 48 hours, it restored successfully. So a nice fingerprint could have been done. It was done. So this guy was, the fingers wasn't even, yeah, you can't even break rigor mortis. I think it's past rigor mortis. This is like, it's stone actually. And yeah, we removed the fingertips and we put it in the solution for 48 hours. That hard finger, do not do it in your kitchen. When my wife walked into the kitchen and she saw all these bottles with look like biltong in it, she almost divorced me. But yeah, there was actually fingerprints in the rehydration um, bottles to get it soft for fingerprinting. So there's some results of it. That stone hard finger came out nice, soft, and puffy, and I could get nice fingerprint results, and it could be scanned and used on APHIS. So that's just a sodium and ethanol, just a solution just to show you after the 48 hours from stone hard mummified fingers till a nice soft finger, and then the different before hydration. If I tried the powder and tape, it didn't even work. After hydration, I used the ink method and I got positive results, and the body was then identified and handed over to the loved ones for a funeral. Same story with this guy, very, very dry, found somewhere in the bush, lying for a couple of weeks to months. And yeah, no one opened a missing person case. So we had to go to the scientific way. Obviously, we start with fingerprints and then DNA, but to DNA, link it to who? So yeah, it came back to fingerprints. Same story. The fingertip was removed. It was put into the rehydration for 48 hours. It became nice and plump. Oh, this was a 24 hours, sorry, 24-hour rehydration. And then a nice fingerprint. And luckily, this guy had a criminal record on the APHIS and he was handed over to the loved ones. So this is my story about the fingerprint techniques. I have one more slide that I just want to carry on to another presentation. I think We'll take all the questions. If there's any questions on fingerprint techniques, we can go back. I just want to go something tongue in the cheek. My next slides is also concerning fingerprints, but something that our detectives in crime scene management did not know can exist. And yeah, working hand in hand with them and with Cape Nature and some of my other hairy friends, um, we solved a couple of cases. So let me jump into this one quickly. It's a few slides, and then we can go over to questions and answers. Okay, so bear with me. Let's go. So if we go to a crime scene, usually you look for the perpetrator. It must be okay. Any questions on the fingerprint techniques?
Fr- Hello, hi, it's Mihala Brooks.
When a police officer or a crime scene detective get called to a crime scene of an housebreaking, they normally look for a person. There must be someone that came with a vehicle, broke into this house, removed the sliding doors, all the windows, and then um, removed some items from the house. So when South African police owners report housebreaking cases to them, there must be a suspect. So with the Lockhart principle, whatever you touch, leave a trace. And that's true. So a couple of cases that's here in the Western Cape against small towns next to the coast, Betty's Bay, Pringle Bay, and Royals. There were a couple of cases that was unsolved, but yet there were positive fingerprints lifted on that scenes. But I'll get back to you with that now. The same story as the previous slides. There's some rich features and fingerprint patterns. Same with the beginning, endings, bifurcations, islands, short ridges, lakes, crossovers, and then overlaps. Um, I'm just going to mention it again, but just bear in mind that we're not going to talk about our human friends. Basic fingerprint patterns again is arch, loops, whorls. There's a couple of more, but I'm not going to go into that again. And then the human hand and finger. So on our fingers, like I said, in South Africa, we only need seven identifiable points or characteristics on our finger or palm print to go to court and to do a positive ID and get a conviction in court. So that's in short just some points I marked out on the fingerprint and also on the palm print. So I can't zoom in now, but if you can zoom in later on, I think this thing is recorded, then you can see that there's some points marked out. Crime scene prints that usually lifted by South African police or by forensic units using the powder and tape method, then you will get this grayish black on tape and then lifting a fingerprint or a palm print. Then for court purposes, you have to mark out different points on it and obviously go to court and give definitions and all that kind of stuff. So just how a crime scene print will look like if a police officer lifts it from a crime scene. And then also your footprints is important. It's not on the criminal database, but you can still use it as identification. This specific one, the guy went into the house, but he took off his shoes not to make a noise when he walks on the tiles. He was arrested a few hours later, and I did the scene when I was still in the South African Police Forensic Unit. I lifted footprints. And when the detective phoned me that they said they got a suspect, can I come and do the footprints? I did that, and he was convicted for house robbery and sentenced to 12 years in jail just because I lifted a footprint and could make a match on that case. So here we go. The fingerprint of a primate or a baboon. Yeah, so this was the suspects in that small towns where the detective was sitting with their hands in the hair, cannot solve the cases there. So I jumped in, assisted them, and we got some results. So this is the Cape Town baboons. If you ever come to Cape Town in South Africa for a holiday or a visit, and you go to the coastal towns, you will see this creatures walking around. Very pleasant, but it can be dangerous if you start feeding them. So there's a small town on our um, on the coastline called Royals, Pringle Bay, and Betty's Bay. So this is the ones there by the red ones, and then Betty's Bay there by the green. So there was about 20 housebreaking cases unsolved, but there was positive fingerprints lifted on the scenes. Fingerprints was processed and scanned through AFIS, but for a while there was no positive hit or a positive hit from AFIS to link any suspect or criminal suspect to a specific housebreaking. And then I decided to make a phone call and got hold of Cape Nature. So this is a photo just of Royals in the Overberg region in the Western Cape. Nice town next to the sea. Little to nothing to do. You can read a lot of books, go to the beach and have a suntan. And then when you do that, close your windows and close your sliding doors because there's suspects walking on on hands and feet. The town next to that one is Pringle Bay, also in Overberg on the Western Cape, also a small coastal town. No street lights, still gravel roads. Very nice place just to go and hang out and get your batteries recharged. And there they are, the suspects. Even if there's a small chance of a window that's open, they will get in and they will destroy your house on the inside. So the police comes there. They only found this on the left-hand side, ransacked, all the cupboards open, everything is broken. But the photo on top, this is a specific one where I lifted fingerprints of the feet or the paws of this specific male baboon. So the human fingerprint and a baboon fingerprint looks exactly the same, but the width of your fingerprint reach, of your finger, yeah, let's call it your reach, is a little bit broader, and then the depth of your fingerprint is a little bit deeper in the baboon's case, because obviously they use their fingerprints for grip, and then obviously they need that more grip jumping up and down in trees. But coming back to the scene, so there's the suspects in the house, ransacked everything. The police get there after they left. And what is the next question? Who is the suspect? Phone the fingerprint experts to come and dust the scene and take photos. Get fingerprints, but obviously nothing on the system. So there's a suspect walking around outside that's doing housebreakings, thinking it's a suspect on two legs. So this is a print that I left is very unclear on this photos, but I could mark out a couple of points. And then I decided to scan it in, and obviously it was negative. And I contacted Cape Nature that works with the baboons when they put on tracker on the on necklaces and all that kind of stuff to monitor how the troop goes around the small, let's call it coastal towns. And there it is, the human hand and the baboon hand. I didn't know until I started my research on baboon fingerprints that they had exactly the same patterns, reach features, everything and you can actually use it for identification. So I did research on it, and of these 20 cases that was unsolved, I solved 17 of those cases with two different troops of baboons. One alpha male had his troop and another alpha male had his troops, and they just went through the coastal towns, that three towns I mentioned, and if there's food and there's a window open, your house is ransacked and destroyed. So there's it. I marked out on this specific paw. I asked Cape Nature while the baboon is um, put the tracker on his necklace and he's still under sedation, if I can just take photos of his hands and paws so that I can mark out just to get my story straight and start my research on them. And there you can see I marked the bifurcations, beginning or endings, short ridges, lakes, overlaps, whorls, loops, and deltas. And that's exactly on the human hand and finger. On the paws, I also marked out bifurcations, beginning or ending, short ridges, and islands. Is it exactly the same on our feet? So they can be identified by fingerprints or by paw prints. This guy is between 6 and 8 weeks old, and you can already see that the ridge features is prominent on his paws and hands, bifurcations, beginning or endings, and lakes and deltas. Was also a female baboon, one of my suspects that was ID'd, also on a kitchen counter. And yeah, the detectives was very happy because they can close 17 cases and they won't have their commanders breathing in the necks for cases that's unsolved. Yeah, again, bifurcations, beginning or endings, lakes, crossovers, deltas, and whirls. So this right in the beginning of my research of baboon fingerprints, identification at your finger, palm, and paw prints. So yeah, that's my short story about my four-legged friends that I'm doing research on their fingerprints and paw prints. And yes, for our detectives here in South Africa, especially working on our coastal small towns, fingerprints of baboons can be mistaken for human prints. Yes, that's true. It is very important if you work with the fingerprints on a crime scene in the area where baboon troops are active and houses are broken into. It might be our primate friends. So don't overlook that. And that's the end of my story. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you guys. Much appreciated all the way from Cape Town, South Africa.